Hello, welcome. Welcome to another Aura's Virtual TownHall meeting. Again, we host this space to have a conversation about important topics that matters to all of us. And especially today, I am super excited to be hosting Joshua Torres from Southern California, Edison, who is not only a friend, but is been really transforming his utility and his workplace to be a climate a climate place and somewhere where we can really see climate action. So thank you for joining us and welcome. I'm going to bring in Josh. And there you go. There you are, Josh. Welcome.
Hi, Aura. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And I feel like I got so excited that I lost an earring. So just wanted to mention.
Can't tell.
So I'm super excited to have you here today because this is one of my favorite topics and something that I have been doing and working on for many years now, which is climate action. And for some of you that don't know me, I'm Aura Vasquez, and I have been a community organizer in the environmental justice space, also a social justice in social justice issues. And I host this Aura's VTH, which stands for Virtual TownHall meetings, so that we can have a conversation with leaders from around the world. I had interviewed elected officials. I have interviewed experts, subject matter experts in different areas. And I am so excited to have Joshua Torres here today. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Aura, so much for having me.
So I guess I would like to just start for my audience to get to know you better. Who are you and why do you care about climate action?
Awesome. Thank you so much. So again, my name is Joshua Torres. Actually, no Aura because we're on a board together, working to elect local environmental champions. On my day job, I work for Southern California Edison, which is one of the larger electric utilities here in California. We serve not the city of Los Angeles, but the greater Los Angeles area. So my title, I'm a senior policy advisor. And in that capacity, I work to engage community leaders like yourself on issues related to climate change. So Southern California Edison, as an all-electric utility, we're really looking at how the electric grid can help achieve the state's decarbonization goals. So looking beyond just getting the electric grid to 100% clean energy, but how can we use this decarbonizing energy source? Because we're already at about 50% clean power. How can we take this low carbon energy that's on a path to 100% clean and use that to help other parts of the economy transition off of fossil fuels, specifically transportation and buildings? So, this is something, that I'm passionate about on my free time, and I'm fortunate enough to be able to do this professionally. So, it's a nice combination of my personal and professional passions.
Yeah, and one thing that I want to mention for the viewers, I see some people already commenting things on Facebook and such, is until very recently, there was not a lot of people of color in this space, in the utility space, in the environmental, in the main, or what they call the mainstream environmental world. I worked for many years for the Sierra Club, which is the largest environmental organization in the world, and the oldest also, so there was not a lot of people that looked like us, or that was, even remotely talking about renewable energy. I mean, I'm constantly the only woman or the only woman of color sitting on tables, really honing on a vision that is incredibly transformative for communities of color. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what has been your work in terms of climate action around the most vulnerable and the most affected by climate change people, which are people of color, Latinos, African Americans, Asian Americans, and just in general, low-income people?
Yeah. So this is something that, we're looking at in conjunction with our efforts to help the state achieve its goals. And this is something that's very near and dear to us because Southern California has a disproportionate amount of vulnerable communities compared to Northern California or even the San Diego region. In the Edison service territory alone, so Edison serves about a third of the state of California, but we have about 45% of the vulnerable communities. So there's this disproportionate amount. And remember, we don't serve Los Angeles. So if you add in LADWP with Southern California Edison, it's well over half of those vulnerable communities that are in this greater LA area. And so we have a variety of programs that we're looking at addressing. How do we bring these communities along? So, these communities are already, suffering the impacts from poor air quality and other environmental issues, water, economic injustice. As we are transitioning these technologies, is there an opportunity to sort of like skip that natural adoption curve and just jump straight into the participation phase? So, we're looking at trying to think outside the box of how we roll out our programs to intentionally incorporate, our most vulnerable customers. And I'll give you one example. So we are, required by the state to put forth, energy efficiency programs. We collect this money from customers every month, and, we have to submit, an application to the state saying we'd like to do X, Y, and Z for energy efficiency programs. And so we're looking, and we just got approved. This is an approved program, but we went and looked beyond just energy efficiency. How can we combine multiple priorities? We have these state goals around helping vulnerable communities. We have these state goals around climate action. Because remember, energy efficiency doesn't necessarily translate into carbon reduction. The electricity is very dynamic. When you conserve electricity, has a big impact on how much GHG you are saving. So we have a program called Energy Savings Assistance, where we go in and replace older, inefficient appliances for low-income customers. And the theory is, by giving them the newer equipment, it's more efficient, improves the quality of life, reduces their energy consumption, helps with their bills. And so we basically took that program and put it on steroids, and we're like, let's do a whole home retrofit. Rather than just replace the refrigerator, let's replace their gas furnace and install an electric heat pump. Let's replace their gas water heater and give them an electric heat pump water. Let's upgrade their panel. Let's do, whole home retrofit for these vulnerable customers. So you're giving them newer, more efficient appliances so their utility bills go down. That's the latest clean energy technology. It's not a fossil fuel replacement. So there's the participation aspect. So instead of, these customers being on the tail end of adoption, they're on the leading edge of adoption. So that just got approved in March. So we will be operationalizing this, and hopefully early next year, we'll be going into the homes of some of our most vulnerable customers and, converting them to all electric and basically modernizing all of their appliances. And that's just,
and this is what we call in our world electrification. So I think some of you have heard me talk about electrification, and you're like, what does that mean? Is she gonna burn everything down or electrify what? I get
not electrocution.
I'm not killing anyone or anybody here, but this idea that we need to start getting all of our homes, our infrastructure, our cities to be electrified, so be ready for electric stoves. And I know that a lot of my Mexican American friends have had concerns about their tortillas and such, so we can talk more about that. But this is extremely important because this is another way of us really acting on climate. Having infrastructure that is ready for solar, for more energy efficiency is really the way to do it. So I appreciate that you're bringing this up, because this is going to be transformative for the grid, even in California. But I guess my follow-up questions, and I see I see folks asking questions in the chat. Feel free to ask more questions. But I guess my question to you following that is, how are we going to make sure that we're powering everybody's home, and all those stoves are powered, and the the water
Vehicles.
pumps and the heaters and the vehicles are powered with 100% renewable energy? So what is your utility, Southern California Edison, doing to make sure that we that we don't have all these electrical appliances, but we're using coal from Arizona or from Utah or from some other place, but we actually using, renewable energy, and we're creating local jobs.
Yeah. So two things. One, I think a lot of people don't appreciate that when you switch from a combustion technology, so gasoline, diesel, natural gas, over to an electric technology, there's an immediate benefit. And also too, I like to separate the climate benefit from the air quality benefit, because there's a lot of overlap, but it's not one-to-one. So, in some instances, you're reducing GHGs, but you're not necessarily helping local air quality, ground level,
And
smog.
GHG, just so you all know, is greenhouse gases.
Yeah, the
Just so you all
climate
know.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pollution.
Yeah, so there's sort of like the low atmosphere stuff that we're breathing, the people are breathing in our lungs, and then like the climate stuff is more in the upper atmosphere. When you electrify, you help with both of those issues today. So the Union of Concerned Scientists did a really good study where they looked at all the electric utilities across the country and said, what's the benefit of driving an electric vehicle? And even in states that have really, really high coal usage, like West Virginia and whatnot, driving an electric vehicle is still better than driving a gasoline car.
Right.
But to your point, importantly, we want to get that down to zero. We don't just want better, we want best. And so to that extent, at least for Southern California Edison, we haven't had any coal since 2014. We have been consistently adding more renewables every single year, so that way our portion of natural gas is shrinking over time. We have a corporate goal to go above and beyond the state goals and be 80% carbon free by 2030. In California, we have this law called SB 100 that sets two goals. One says that all utilities have to be 60% renewable by 2030. We're saying we think we need to be 80%. And then everybody has to be 100% clean by 2045. And so there are a lot of efforts looking at what that will look like. Without getting too wonky, there's a process that we go through on an annual basis that we have to submit our procurement plan to the Public Utilities Commission. It's called the Integrated Resources Plan, which basically is our long-term procurement plan for what resources we're going to procure when, to show that we have a consistent, solid plan for getting both to 2030 and to 2045.
Wow, that's incredible. And my question to you was going to be, or the conversation that I wanted to spark with just everyone here in this conversation is, scientists from all around the world, the scientific community told us that, and this was 2 years ago actually, that we only had 12 years to really mitigate the effects of climate change before it was going to be irreversible. I was reading today at The Guardian an article of so many lawsuits that fossil fuel companies are receiving because since 1979, so I was 1 year old, since then, they knew about the adverse effects of climate change and they lied about it. So, I was also part of a utility. LADWP, Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, is our utility because it's public. So in a way, in Los Angeles, we all own DWP. So I feel like it still is accountable, to me. And it was really hard to get. It almost felt like the Titanic. Like I was trying to shift the Titanic around to something that was going to be just for something that was going to be better for us, for our health, for our economy, and for our environment. So how are you guys navigating that? The fact that there is so much public pressure and support around fighting climate change, that we know that the fossil fuel industry has not been transparent about it, and that now people like us that look like us are also asking for climate action now. So what are some of the things how are you guys as a privately owned utility navigating this path?
So I think in some ways, being the fact that we're privately owned allows us to be a little bit more nimble. So back in 2017, obviously we've been working, this California is trying to take a leadership role in this. So we've been ahead of the curve, whether it's rooftop solar, utility scale solar, electric vehicles, battery storage. But back in 2016, the work started in 2016, we started looking at all these trends. And we did an analysis that looked at where is this going to lead? Like, instead of having, a bunch of one-off strategies, like let's develop a holistic strategy for how all these different pieces fit together. Mm-hmm. And importantly, how can we optimize them? How can we make sure that the work that we're doing to decarbonize the grid is also supporting efforts to electrify homes and businesses? Yeah. How can we make sure that we're doing this in a way that maintains affordability? Because, just because you're going clean doesn't necessarily mean it's affordable. There's expensive ways to go clean, and there's more affordable ways to go clean. Yeah. So we call this our Pathway 2045 paper. It's a white paper. It's available to the public, all of our sources, everything. But we looked at, the trajectory that the state wants us to have. They want us to have a 40% GHG reduction by 2030 and be 100% carbon neutral by 2045. We said, what is it going to take to get there? Not just the electric sector, because in California, the electric sector represents less than 15% of the climate emissions. Transportation is half. Yeah. And then when you look at local air quality, the electric sector is less than 2% of the smog that we're so famous for in LA. 80% of it is transportation. So when you look at all these different climate issues, you really need to think beyond the electric sector. You need to look at the entire economy. And so we call this Pathway 2045, which is basically, as the grid gets cleaner, everything that you plug into it also gets cleaner. So starting today, we can electrify our vehicles, whether it's passenger vehicles or heavy duty, transportation vehicles. We can electrify our appliances, our water heaters, our furnaces. And there's an immediate environmental benefit, both in terms of climate and local air quality. And then that benefit grows over time as the grid continues to decarbonize. And so we're taking this Pathway 2045 analysis and using that as our blueprint for everything that we do, whether it's a program, whether it's an infrastructure build out, as we are, looking at our needs for grid investment over the next 5, 10, 15 years, we're looking at, what enhancements are we going to need in the future, not just what we need now, but what do we need in order, right now we have 10% solar adoption. What does the grid need to look like when we have 50% solar adoption? Yeah. What do we need to do to support all of these electric vehicles? What types of programs can we develop so to encourage customers to charge their electric vehicles at times that maximize the amount of renewable energy that they're pulling off of the grid, so that way all these different pieces sync up together? Same thing works with electric water heaters and electric HVACs. We want all these technologies to work together in a system, so that way we are maximizing affordability for customers, we are maximizing our clean energy resources, and most importantly, making sure that we're keeping the lights on. Because if the lights go out, people aren't going to support this. We had some rotating outages last summer, and half my time was spent talking to stakeholders, trying to calm them down and be like, no, we're not backtracking. Like that's not the right way. This is a little blip. If anything, we came out publicly and said, if anything, the rotating outages showed we need to go faster. Yeah, absolutely. We need more energy storage. Signal. We need more wind. We need more solar. We need more storage. We need more of these resources. So that way we have those backup, that backup generation for when things go down. Yeah. So everything that we're doing is tied back into this analysis of what we need to do to get to 2045.
And there are a couple of things that I want to add to these comments that you just made. We're talking here to Joshua Torres. He works for Southern California Edison. He's a policy advisor, and we're talking about climate action. And if you have any questions, you can post them in the comments and anywhere where you're watching from. Your questions and your comments are also welcome. One piece that when in my days as a commissioner for LADWP was this piece around equity and how we design programs that benefit those most impacted by climate change, and also those that oftentimes programs are not designed for. For example, solar. Traditionally, solar was developed for someone that had a home, that had a roof, right? That had a good roof, that had good credit, that could afford it. And the places where there was, and I don't know if Jorge is still here watching, but him and I had a conversation about this 10 years ago, and this actually ignited the Solar for Renters program. And this idea that where there's the most solar capacity, so where we have the most solar in LA, the parts where there's like it's shining and there's no trees and such, is the parts where there's the highest pollution and the lowest solar penetration. So those are people that don't oftentimes have solar. So I want to hear, in terms of transportation and all of the things that you guys are doing to help adapt people to electrical vehicles and also adapt to solar, what are some of the practices, or what is it that you're doing to make sure that people that traditionally don't enroll into solar programs or have an electric car or even remotely think that this is for them, that they can adapt so they can also be part of the solution?
Yeah,
oh, there you
sure.
go. Jorge's here. Hello. There he is. Solar for renters. Jorge Madrid, big shout out to you.
Yeah, well, so speaking of Jorge, he used to be on something called our Clean Energy Access Working Group. So several years ago, when we started all of this pathway work, we saw the connection with our vulnerable communities and the need to bring them along. And so we started an advisory group where we brought in different organizations from the environmental justice space to be a sounding board, and also to be sort of like an idea lab on what programs can we develop to provide that type of access. So we call it the Clean Energy Access Working Group. And every year we let them pick a topic of like what's important to you guys. And we did start with electric vehicles specifically. And they advise us on different filings that we provide. So for example, a couple years ago, we submitted a filing to the Public Utilities Commission asking for money to help electrify medium and heavy duty transportation. And we specifically selected the medium and heavy duty sector because of feedback from environmental justice groups that said that sector is more important to us because that's where the pollution that we're breathing is coming from. When you look at like the gateway city. So in Los Angeles, we have two really big ports, the ports of LA and Long Beach, and the trucks travel up the freeways, through the valleys, through a lot of low-income Black and brown communities out to this region where I grew up in called the Inland Empire. Then there's lots of warehouses, and the trucks sit there and they're idle. So a lot of a disproportionate amount of the poor air quality that we have in Southern California comes from the logistics industry. And so they said that's really important for us to electrify. So that's why we started with that sector. They also provided feedback to us as well, too, from a participation standpoint. They said, we want to make sure that our communities have access to these benefits. And so we included a special rebate for school buses and public transit. So within the Charge Ready Transport program, there's rebates for any commercial fleet, special focus on logistics centers, but then there's an adder for public transit agencies and school districts to help them electrify their fleets. And that's just one example of how we've taken feedback from these environmental justice groups and incorporated it into the work that we're doing. More recently, we are getting ready to launch our light duty electric vehicle program, actually going live in a couple weeks. And again, we consulted with these same groups, talked about what's important to you. And so in that application, we have a goal to install 50% of those chargers in what the state categorizes as environmentally impacted communities. We call that the Cal Green Enviro Screen here in California. We also have a special emphasis on multifamily because again, the feedback we've received, those areas are really hard to target. We have something like almost half of our customers are renters. And, studies have shown that
solar for renters.
Similar with electric vehicles, studies have shown, if you have access to charging at home, you're significantly, exponentially more likely to buy an electric vehicle. And if you're a renter and you don't own the home, there's a lot of challenges, in terms of, who pays for what and, both the investment and then the ongoing charging. So Charge Ready 2 will have special carve-outs for multifamily, whether it's apartments or condos or whatever. Specific to solar, we have recently revamped our community solar program. So, we see that as one of the best ways to help provide access to those communities because there are just a lot of challenges outside of the utility. You have the issue of, trying to convince property owners to allow solar on. And community solar allows you to kind of bypass that. If you find a vacant lot in the community, or if you can put it on a warehouse or some other offsite location, but then still give the benefits in terms of net energy metering to those customers. So community solar opens up that opportunity. And so we just completed a solicitation last month. And so we'll be reviewing those and hopefully building some new community solar projects in the near future.
Amazing. I mean, I have so many things to say. I want to give a big shout out to former LADWP commissioner. Also, he is here. So Bill Vanderberg, who I in an endearing way call him my padrino, because when I was, when I first got to LADWP, full of ideas and energy and representing folks that usually have not been represented at DWP. He was a great mentor to me and a great friend, and someone that always backed even the craziest ideas that I had, like closing down the 3 coastal gas plants that that really have pushed Los Angeles to get to 100% renewable. So I want to give him a big shout out. He's watching. Thank you. We have a couple of questions from the audience. Actually, Bernard Henderson sent that question on Facebook, and it's a multi-layered question, I just want to say. But he wants to know, and I'm just going to start with this one because it's a multi-layered question. He wants to know, what's stopping residents from changing over from fossil fuel? And I just want to also just create the distinction that, it's not the same LADWP, which is the utility in Los Angeles, which is public, and Southern California Edison, which is a private utility. So I just wanted to make that distinction, but I don't know if you want to kick it off. What's stopping people from making the changeover?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And that's something that we have spent a lot of time at looking at the entire customer experience from awareness. So awareness is a huge issue. A lot of customers don't even know these technologies exist. I mean, you'd be surprised.
They don't feel it's for them. It's
Or they don't even know it exists. Like ask your grandmother what a heat pump water heater is. She's probably not going to tell you.
en la estufa.
She's like, what?
That's what it is. That's what my grandma would say. She's like, ¿Por qué no calienta? Why don't you boil the water in the stove?
Yeah, and even with electric vehicles, I mean, I had a stakeholder one time that thought that you have to get a new EV charger every time you get a new EV, like back in the 90s when every phone had a different connector. Remember?
Yeah.
And so you have the awareness at the beginning, like we have to do a better job. And it can't just be us, we need these private companies, the companies that are selling these technologies. We need governments. It needs to be all of society really kind of pushing this out, increasing the awareness and really talking about the value to customers. Because if you just talk to them and say, oh, it's cleaner, it's good for the environment, it's only going to entice a small segment of the population. You need to explain why an electric vehicle is better. They're quieter, they have better pickup, they're cheaper to own. It is way cheaper to drive on electricity than it is to drive on gasoline.
Can we zoom in there for just a second? Can we just go deeper? Because this is so important. And for you guys to know, at LADWP, they have a rebate and of $500 if you buy an electric vehicle that is used. So, so that's starting there. And I feel like they have, and you also can get your electric charger, for free, basically. They give you, I think it's $600 or $700 to put an electric charger in your home. You also have several rebates from the state and from the federal level. So if you know what you're doing, and if you buy an electric car, you're looking maybe at $2,000, $3,000 buying a car than something else. So a lot of la raza, nuestra gente, they don't know that these programs exist, and they don't think it's for them. Yep. And I just want to also say that, again, for many years, the fossil fuel industry sold us the idea that renewables and electric vehicles wasn't for us, that it wasn't too expensive, that it was unreliable. It's going to leave you in the middle of the street. It's going to leave you, it's going to leave your family stranded. And that is not the case. So I just wanted to zoom in on that transportation part. Oh, yeah. Because earlier you also told us that transportation is going to be key for us to get to 100% renewable energy and protect our planet. So I don't know if you want to add anything else around this specific part around like cars and electrification in cars and transportation.
Yeah, I just want to echo, Southern California Edison has a lot of the same programs, and we've also been looking at not just increasing awareness also too, but making them easier easier to access. Because if you're a low income person, you might, access to credit is an issue, and you might not have the financial capability to get a loan that's a little bit larger and wait for a rebate. So we've been working with our partners, PG&E in San Diego, to create a statewide program where it's point of sale. So when you show up to the dealership, the dealer takes care of all the paperwork, and it's taken off of your purchase price. So you don't have to qualify for as big of a loan. So again, we're looking at the entire customer experience to make it as easy as possible. So that way when customers go, because if they encounter barriers, if they get frustrated, they're not going to purchase these technologies.
Right, absolutely.
To make it easy and affordable.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, they're not going to do it.
The second layer to this question that Bernard is saying is the distribution of energy. And I'm not sure, I kind of get an idea of what you mean, but I want to talk about energy democracy. And I'm speaking about energy democracy as a way that as we produce our power, as we generate power, right, from renewables and lower our energy consumption with energy efficiency, we got to make sure that all of these programs are accessible for everyone. Everyone has a chance. And that's super important because that also speaks to equity and access and transparency, which is something that oftentimes utilities can do a better job. So maybe you can tell us, what is Southern California Edison doing to make sure that you reach those people que no hablan inglés, like the people that don't speak English, the people that are oftentimes, in that tier, that they get assistance and they don't pay a whole lot. So they feel like, well, I'm already paying like very little. Why would I rock the boat here? So tell us a little bit about how are you guys making sure that there is real energy democracy and that you guys are reaching everyone and that everyone has a chance?
Yeah. So again, it's a multi-pronged approach. It's not one size fits all. First, we're leaning really heavily on our CBO partners because, especially if there's a language barrier, a lot of times there's also a trust barrier. And so, we've worked really hard to identify organizations that have those relationships within those different communities, whether it's Latino or API, faith-based, rural, whatever. And, we have different programs to encourage those CBOs, community-based organizations, to help bring customers in and sign them up for these programs. One being what we call our Empower program. So sort of like a one-stop shop where, these CBOs get trained on all the different programs that we have available, whether it's our CARE, low-income assistance, or medical baseline, or EV rebates. And, they go to their, members and basically sell them on it. And they say like, hey, give me your information. Let's see what you qualify for.
Right.
Fill out one application, automatically populates all the other applications, again, making it easy. And then the CBO gets, compensated a little bit of money for their work that they're doing, helping
for their outreach.
Their outreach. And then the other part too is similar to what I talked about previously, is also designing those programs, making sure that we're designing the programs so that way they're accessible to those low-income communities, removing those barriers, whether it be, financing or access, designing special rates, like with electric vehicles, we're looking at, as we're installing public charge, or not, we're not installing, but we're providing incentives to help third parties install public charging. We're providing higher levels of incentives for areas that are environmentally disadvantaged.
Claro.
So there's a variety of strategies that we're implementing to try to reach these communities and help bring them along.
Yeah, pero claro, I also want to mention that climate action, it starts with us. So it starts at home, guys. And if we want to see real climate action and energy democracy, we have to ask for it. We have to continue advocating for it. We have to continue attending the LADWP meetings, participating in these working groups. we need to make sure that our voices are part of the conversation and that we're seated on the table. So this is not something that is going to be a miracle and that certainly all of our prayers are answered. And Josh and I have a special, no, this isn't going to happen that way. It's our duty to also inform our neighbors and tell them that there are these programs that we can do better, that we can participate, and that we deserve better. So, and this only happens if we are also seeking that opportunity. So I want to encourage you, whether you are in Northern California and maybe you have a different utility like PG&E, or if you are in the larger territory of Los Angeles with Southern California Edison, to figure it out. Go to their website and see how you can also participate. And at LADWP here in Los Angeles, it's easy. Every other Tuesday, the board members are meeting, and you can call and talk. Yeah. Or you can send an email and you can participate and voice your concern. So I just want to make sure that people know.
And they can call us too. Like our energy advisors at our call center are trained on all of these programs. We also, fact in case you're ever in Trivial Pursuit, Southern California Edison supports more languages in-house than any other utility in the country.
Look at that. I didn't know that. That's so interesting.
Yeah,
but Russian, I encourage you to also get involved with your local environmental justice organization. In Southern California, there are amazing ones. CEJA, Communities for a Better Environment, of course, the Sierra Club, Food and Water Watch. There's a lot of organizations working with neighbors, working together to make sure that the utilities are also working, for us and to protect our environment. So, okay. So this is a question that I also have because I have my own opinions about this question, which is the idea of renewable natural gas, which every time I hear this term, it kind of hurts my stomach a little bit because as someone that is 100% renewable lover, I have a hard time hearing people say, bueno, pues, ahora, we do this practice and it's renewable natural gas. And I'm like, oh God, please don't spread those rumors out there. What's your take on this?
How much time you got?
No, we can go on this. We can go on this for a little bit.
So there's a few things. So, with our pathway analysis, we see the future as electric led. We don't see the future as electric only. So we will use electricity for a lot more of our energy needs, but we still will need other energy sources. And we do see low carbon gas sources like renewable natural gas and green hydrogen to help fill those roles. But we see the throughput of the gas system shrinking considerably by about 50%. So our analysis, our data has shown, and it's not just Edison too. The federal government, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory that helped with the LADWP 100 study,
the LA 100 study. I want to get them in my podcast. So stay tuned, guys.
So they've come to similar conclusions that the ability for renewable natural gas to scale is going to be very limited, both from a technical perspective, like physically, can we produce a lot of it? And the answer is no. But also costs. It's expensive to produce. Same thing with hydrogen. Right. Hydrogen is good in certain situations, but it's very, very energy intensive. When you hear people talk about habitat preservation, hydrogen uses 3 to 5 times more electricity than battery electric technology. So we see these low carbon gases helping to fill niches that we can't electrify. So when we talk about residential and commercial buildings, heat pump technology is cost effective today. So it doesn't make sense to use expensive sources like renewable gas and hydrogen for furnaces and water heaters. It's better to save those for things that are hard to electrify, like certain industrial processes, like making cement, long haul trucking. Like if a pickup truck or a semi truck wants to pick up stuff at the Port of LA and drive across the country and doesn't want to stop and charge. So those hard to electrify sources, and even that last 5 or 6% of the electric grid that batteries and solar won't be able to get, that's a good use for biogas and hydrogen for that the peaking, what we call peaking needs. What peaking is. So we're not anti-renewable gas or anti-hydrogen. We just, there's a role for it, and it's a very specific role.
Yeah. And I want to say that I am a little bit of a renewable natural gas hater, and this is why. So let's talk about where the renewable natural gas comes from. So oftentimes natural gas, or traditionally, we use a method called fracking, and a lot of you guys understand what fracking is. We use a cocktail of chemicals. We inject them in the earth, and the earth shakes, and we capture the gas, and that's what we call natural gas. It's just gas from the earth. But renewable natural gas often is mined or you get it from like trash. So when you have like your landfill, and I'm just trying to use language that is very accessible for everybody.
Dairy farms.
There you go, dairy farms, con el cow poop, and things like that. I mean, this is plain English, guys. Like I don't need to get wonky here, but so they process that and they produce renewable natural gas. So now what's the issue? That methodology is also energy intensive. So they're getting energy from somewhere to produce more energy, right? So this is where I'm coming from when I say that I'm a little bit of a renewable natural gas hater, because a lot of times that energy is not coming from a renewable energy source. It's coming from regular natural gas. So, so it's kind of like a little bit of a catch-22. The other thing is that I support farming that is restorative to our earth. Yeah. And a lot of these is designed for big farming. And that has its own challenges. Big farming, as you know, takes tons of water. A lot of them don't even pay for our water. There are towns in the Central Valley where there are people that don't even have running water on their towns, but all of their fields are, like utilized water. So I wanted to mention this piece because this has become very popular, and everybody's like, well, why don't we turn trash into, electricity? And it sounds like an appealing, idea. It's a noble idea, but when you look at the nuances and in the details, it's not so great. So This is why.
It really matters where that renewable natural gas is coming from, because it's not all equal. It's a kind of an umbrella term, and gas advocates kind of just want to put everything under that umbrella. But there's some types that do have a positive benefit, because if you are legitimately capturing fugitive methane, that's a good thing. But if you're just putting stuff in there just so you can say that it's renewable, that's not helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other thing too is, to get a little wonky, but not too wonky, is there's an efficiency argument too. Electric technologies are significantly more efficient. So, if you take that renewable natural gas and put it into, an electric plant, you're going to get a lot more energy out of it versus if you burn it in a stove or a furnace. And so it also goes further too. So it's a lot more complicated than just to say, oh, we'll just replace everything with RNG, because that's a much more difficult task.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're talking to Joshua Torres from Southern California, Edison. He is one of their policy advisors, and we're talking all things climate action here, from transportation, electrification, the role of utilities. We want to hear from you. Send us your questions. What are your reactions to all this information that we're giving you? We keep getting questions around solar panels and costs. And this idea that solar panels are too expensive, and I feel like I have been hearing this rhetoric for a really long time, even when today renewables are cheaper than fossil fuel generation. So and also the renewable energy space is employing more people than the fossil fuel energy, which is outstanding, for us to be able to get there. So what do you say to this rhetoric that renewables are more expensive? Just to make this question more general, this one is much about solar panels and the cost, and that people don't have enough, to pay for them. So what do you say to people with the rhetoric that renewables are too expensive?
So I'll kind of answer this in two ways. I do want to talk about the solar, but I'll also talk about renewables more broadly. So with renewables more broadly, it's important to distinguish between just the raw generation, what does it cost to produce a renewable electron, and then what does it cost to deliver? Because it is true, on the one hand, the cost to produce renewables is the cheapest. It's a fraction of the cost of natural gas or coal. But there are other costs associated with delivering it. You have to think about energy storage. You have to remember that, renewables don't provide power 24 hours a day. So there are other costs associated with it. But when we did our pathway analysis and we looked at the whole system. So let's go to 2045 when we're 100% renewable. We've got all the energy storage we need. We're driving, almost everybody has an electric vehicle. We've got lots of all electric homes. We found that energy costs will go down because, again, electricity is more expensive per unit than fossil fuels, but these technologies are much more efficient. So when you look at what's the total cost to own, or I should say to live an electric lifestyle, it's about 1/3 cheaper than fossil fuels. So because keep in mind, like if you're driving an electric vehicle, what are you not spending money on? You're not going to the gas station.
Right.
Because we get that question all the time. Oh, I don't want my electric bill to go up. Well, if you have an all electric home and electric vehicle, your electric bill is probably going to go up. But what other bills are you getting rid of? And what's the net effect? So if you don't have a gas bill and you don't have a gasoline bill, if your electric bill goes up a little bit, but your other bills go down by more, that's a net savings for you, the consumer. So we do, firmly believe that electrification is the most cost-effective way to transition to a clean energy future. And, as these technologies scale up, because it is more expensive to buy these electric technologies today, but the costs are declining rapidly. I mean, just look at energy storage alone. For the past 10 years, they've had 10 to 35% cost declines year over year. So that's not a one-time. That's every single year the costs are dropping by 10 to 30%. 10 years ago, lithium-ion battery was about like $1,200 a kWh, and now it's down to just over 100. I mean, these are dramatic cost declines, and they're forecasted to continue for at least another 10 years. So these technologies will continue to get cheaper, and they'll always be cheaper to operate. Specific to solar, again, not all, or rooftop solar, I should say, because there's rooftop solar and then there's large-scale solar. Rooftop solar is the most expensive of all the renewables. You lose the economies of scale when you're installing on individual homes and businesses versus building a large solar or wind farm out in the desert. Even when you factor in like transmission costs, it's still cheaper to use utility scale versus distributed.
So large solar farms often are in the desert.
Yeah, because you get economies of scale for the local rooftop solar industry. A huge part of their costs are related to customer acquisition, so marketing. Paying people to go stand at Home Depot and
tell you that you have a rebate, that you can do it, that we can do it for free, that those things. Yeah.
So don't take those comments to say that we're anti-solar or anti-distributed resources. We're very pro.
Well, anti-residential, because I feel like I want to add that, yes, the residential there's a little bit of a competition with the large scale, but also the residential give us something that the large scale doesn't, which is that reliance in basin. Correct. That sometimes can be tricky when you're bringing, I'm speaking from the experience of LADWP where we have, solar farms far.
Correct.
And if something happens, God forbid, if there is an earthquake, a fire, a terrorist attack, God forbid, something terrible happens and we cannot bring it, we also need to have a portfolio that is here at home.
Well,
so that also...
Now you guys are connected to the Edison system. You're part of the energy imbalance market. So
that is correct.
So you can rely on your neighbors.
This is very utility world right here. We're talking, but bear with us because you need to guys know this too.
Aura does bring up a good point. And I don't think of them as in competition. I think of them as complementary because, again, you're right. There are a lot of benefits for having these resources locally. There are at the individual level, but also, at the societal level. And that's why, we are supportive of these resources. We forecast that half of all of our single family homes will have rooftop solar by 2045. But we're looking at what's fair. what's fair for the customers that have these resources and have invested their hard-earned money in installing them, and also too, what's fair for everyone else, because we also have to recognize there are some customers that literally will never ever be able to do it. Like I myself, I live in a condo. I don't own my own roof. I don't have permission. I don't have the legal authority to install solar. And then there's half of our customers.
That's another program we need to push for my folks that are into, energy democracy. There it is.
Yeah. And then half of our customers are renters. And there's all kinds of economic and legal issues about getting renters access to these technologies. And so we have to balance out the benefits for all of these different customers and the system. Also, too, I really want to emphasize the importance of storage. Like because California has so much solar already, installing just solar doesn't really move the needle, doesn't get us closer to 100% carbon-free electricity. We have this issue where we're basically wasting solar for many months out of the year because there's too much. And so this is why we need customers moving forward to also add the storage. And also from an individual perspective, if you want to fully unlock the benefits of these technologies, you want that storage, because solar panels only work during the day and not the entire day. Most people think that, like right now it's summer, it's 6 o'clock here in LA, it's bright as day outside, but from the solar panels aren't working right now.
Right. It's not enough. It's not enough for the type of system that we're referring to.
We really need storage. So we're looking at working with the Public Utilities Commission to adjust the way that we compensate rooftop solar to push customers more towards solar plus storage moving forward, and not just standalone storage.
Yeah, microgrids, which is something that people should know. The idea that you can have solar panels, a battery, you can store the energy in your batteries, use it when you need it. Even maybe deploy some back to the utility for them to buy. I mean, like, this is my dream, guys. Yeah. We're almost there. And if Jorge Madrid is still here, he can testify that I have been talking about this for a decade or so. So it's exciting that, like, I'm sitting here talking to you about this, and this is almost a reality.
It's a reality today. Like, storage is cost effective in California today, but the way that the state incentivizes it, because let's be honest, most customers are going to look at their financial interests first, even if they're going green. Like, if they have a choice between solar and you get, this rebate, or, you add storage and your rebate goes down by a little bit, they're not going to do it. So that's why, we're looking at working with the Public Utilities Commission to adjust it so that way the policy aligns with, or the incentives align with the state's climate goals, because right now they don't.
Absolutely. Okay, we're talking to Joshua Torres from Southern California Edison. He's a policy advisor there, and he's been answering all of our questions and beyond. We've been really talking shop now, and I also want to mention that Josh and I sit on the Legal Conservation Voters board. And our mission is to support good environmental candidates to run for office. So that is exciting. More to come. What is something that is giving you hope in terms of all this work that you see kind of flourishing in the recent days now that we're post-pandemic? What's giving you hope?
I think, seeing a lot of energy with a lot of the local activists around climate action. I think seeing more of the large automotive manufacturers making really big investments in electric vehicles. My spouse works in the automotive industry, so I appreciate what it means when a Ford or GM or Volkswagen comes out and says we're going to spend Volvo, and they say we're going to spend $30 billion developing new electric vehicles, retrofitting plants, because I think that is really the key. If we can get those to scale, because, again, I grew up in the Inland Empire, which has some of the worst air quality in the United States. And, if we want to tackle the local air quality issue, you have to deal with transportation.
Absolutely.
And then
and also, we didn't get to talk about public transit, and maybe that will be a topic for the future. But absolutely, how do we also utilize bike lanes, public transit, and electrical vehicles as you're sharing?
As a system, because they're all connected.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's time for us to go. And I see a lot of folks that want to actually join our conversation on Instagram. So I am going to say goodbye to everyone on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, and on Twitch. My young people that are watching on Twitch, thank you so much for joining us. If you want to, you can join us for another 5 minutes with Joshua as we bring other people into our live stream, so that we can continue having this conversation. But thank you so much all for coming. Stay tuned in my social media for more Auras BTH. Let's see who I bring next. If you guys have any ideas of people that I should invite, and so that we can, as a community, come and learn more and ask these interesting questions to people, let me know. Have a great day, and I see everyone on Instagram soon. Bye-bye. I see you guys on Instagram right now. Bye.